very much, Emma, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. As mentioned, my name is Dustin Carey. I'm the Climate Adaptation Lead with our Green Municipal Fund, and can jump to the next slide, please. So the Green Municipal Fund has been up and running for 26 years now, and over that time, we have allocated more than $1.9 billion to projects coast to coast to coast. More than 2,700 projects have been approved in that time, and we offer a unique blend of funding and capacity building to really advance and accelerate the delivery of low carbon, net zero aligned, and resilient solutions for municipalities across Canada. Next slide, please. One of our most recent additions to GMF and what will be the focus of the webinar today is content within our Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation initiative. This is was really a mechanism under the National Adaptation Strategy to support the resilient building of resilience to the impacts of climate change in local governments. And across LLCA, we're delivering support through three distinct funding tracks. Climate Ready Plans and Processes, which really helps leverage municipal-wide systems like, such as risk assessments, adaptation plans, and the integration of the actions that come out of those into systems such as asset management and land use planning to build resilience over the long term. Adaptation and action, which really drives on-the-ground solutions to climate risk to really, at the end of a project, leave a community better off to deal with the impacts of climate change. And financing adaptation, which is designed to pilot and prove new mechanisms for financing adaptation projects to diversify capital pools for municipalities to draw on to really implement a number of these solutions. Next slide, please. So first look, hot off the presses, but can share with you here today that as you listen to some of the projects and case studies in this webinar, FCM will be launching funding later this spring, a first call for applications in our rapid adaptation projects to really help drive a number of similar projects in smaller communities. First call for applications will be launching in May, and this is really designed around quick wins for long-term resilience in communities with populations of under 50,000. It will pair funding and peer learning to accelerate solutions. And I know this will be prompting questions. I'm going to have to ask you to hold them for now. We'll be having another webinar about this funding offer in May. And FCM Connect, our newsletter, is the best place to stay informed for more information. Next slide, please. But if you would like to brainstorm the types of projects that this offer can support you with, I'd refer you to the toolkit that's going to be discussed today, which identifies a number of project activities under these four resilience focus areas that is really at the heart of our rapid adaptation projects. Resilient community facilities, community heat resilience, community flood resilience, and community wildfire resilience, which were specifically identified as challenges that, to varying degrees, every community in Canada is facing. So whether you are in northern BC or Labrador, there will be a solution under this funding stream that applies for you and can connect you with other communities facing similar challenges. Look forward to hearing from our other panelists today, and I will turn it over to Jim.
Great, thank you very much. The next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some tools that we worked on to support this new offer, and I think are generally helpful for small communities who are looking to get going on adaptation. Next slide, please. So I'm with the Fraser Basin Council. We're a charitable nonprofit organization that brings people together to advance sustainability in British Columbia, and we're a partnership of all orders of Canadian government, four orders, as well as civil society and the private sector. And Aboriginal rights and title is part of our DNA. It's part of our founding charter. Since 1997, we've worked collaboratively on many, many initiatives to support BC communities, from flood management, community wildfire planning, energy efficiency, sustainable transportation, watershed planning, and others. And over the years, we've had some great opportunities to collaborate with FCM on adaptation initiatives in particular, often with smaller communities, including the Northeast Climate Resilience Network, which is a collaborative in the Northeast to support communities there. We've done a variety of things around training and climate projections and asset management. There's a link in the chat to our retooling website, which provides sort of general resources around adaptation and resilience in BC. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kind of walk through the toolkit at a high level in a few minutes we have here. This graphic kind of shows the pathway through the various tools that have been developed in support of this new offer. The first stage, of course, is around planning and resourcing. And as you can see, there's some tools to support at the beginning stages, some fact sheets, impact mapping tool, and template. We then go to the design stage. So there's some tools there as well, which we'll speak to, and implementation, and all the way through to monitoring. So we'll just talk a little bit about some examples through this, as well as the reason for trying to create some of these tools. Next slide, please. So we've tried to work as best possible to sort of design this in a way that understands the needs and challenges of smaller communities. You know, some of these are pretty obvious to probably all of you. Many of you are with smaller communities, so I'm not saying much new here probably, but things like limited staff capacity, which is obviously a challenge in smaller communities, fewer technical resources or in-house expertise. Budgets and infrastructure are always going to be a challenge. And of course, funding for resilient upgrades is going to be even more of a challenge, given that just trying to keep current systems up and running is a challenge on its own. And finally, equity considerations. So we know that many vulnerable groups tend to face the greatest climate impacts, which means that adaptation strategies need to be designed for their specific needs in mind. Next slide, please. So when we design these kind of toolkits, we're thinking about things like simplicity, using clear language, flexibility, that they're able to be adapted to different contexts and needs because every community across the country is different. Third, that the tools need to be scalable, that they should support small incremental steps so that people can start there, take manageable actions, and build some momentum. Of course, with adaptation, it's easy to get overwhelmed because there's so many things that you could do or should do. And finally, we need to prioritize practical action over complexity. So there's always going to be a more right answer or better information. These tools are about trying to get to real world application with concrete examples, references, lessons learned. And so what we've tried to do is in doing this is to have conversations with a variety of communities who are actually doing this work, and you're going to hear from some of them after, to build on their experiences through community interviews. Next slide. So the toolkit includes, some of this will be not possible to read, but I believe there'll be some links provided in the chat to these for you to look at now or after. So, for example, the toolkit includes fact sheets on the 4 areas that Dustin mentioned around extreme heat, flooding, community wildfire, and resilient facilities, community facilities. So, providing some examples around what communities have done in BC, or sorry, in Canada, um, and based on community experiences, key steps to successful implementation and best practices. The next slide, please. Um, There are also work plan templates. So as you start to plan out your work, um, sample activities identified under each theme area to help ground planning and real world examples. So sample activities include things like battery backup installation, wetland restoration or construction, prescribed or cultural burning, and heat safety outreach. And to support implementation, the work plan template provides a structured step-by-step outline from resourcing, design, implementation to evaluation. So it helps teams to clearly outline tasks and assign responsibilities, estimate timelines, and track progress. At the same time, as I mentioned before, equity is an important part of the consideration. So activities are designed to reduce barriers and prioritize communities that are most vulnerable from whether that's power outages, heat, smoke, emergencies. And the work plan encourages teams to intentionally plan for access, communication, and benefits to those folks. Um, Next, please. So some just sort of sample examples of how we're trying to incorporate equity considerations, things like considering physically accessible pathways when we're considering habitat restoration, if design features include pathways and that kind of thing. Um, Framework also considers other potential challenges like balancing ecological goals with accessibility needs and emphasizing things like visual tools to communicate design options, incorporating feedback from Indigenous communities and disability advocates and others. Next, please. There's also a budget template, which you can see by looking at the website there. To include cost estimates for these types of projects. And again, trying to simplify things so that it's easier to get a budget so that you can seek funding. It's designed so that you can start with, a fairly standard approach using, for example, if you're hiring external consultants, but can be adapted if you prefer to or have staff that you can allocate to the project. Next, please. As well, there's an RFP template, assuming that you may need to go to outside support, outside contractors. And you may already have this, but if you don't have this available, again, it's kind of a helpful tool with fillable tables so that you can quickly get an RFP out the door. Next, please. The impact mapping tool is really helpful in trying to build a case for why this is important and used across different thematic areas and activities, giving you idea of the co-benefits and why this is important and helping you to consider whether that's community well-being, equity, biodiversity, or partnerships with others before you move to implementation. Next, please. So for all the tools we've talked about, we're trying to provide simple and flexible guidance, accessible formats, procurement support, in order to reduce barriers and enable greater local ownership, since communities can easily adapt the tools to fit their local context, and ultimately hope to build stronger trust and alignment, helping local teams feel confident and supported as they move from planning to action. So I'll leave it at that and pass it back to the FCM staff. The contact information is there if you have any questions for us. And my colleague Sybil Zhang is also was involved in this project in developing the materials.
Thanks so much, Jim. I'm so excited for people to be able to get their hands on these tools. There's so much information that your team has put into them, and I'm looking forward to people being able to put all this information to use. And on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Jake to talk a bit about a recent project in the town of Essex in southwestern Ontario to talk about how they addressed many of the climate risks that they're experiencing in their community through a tangible project. Jake, over to you. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending today's session. So, as mentioned, my name's Jake. I'm with the town of Essex in southwestern Ontario. You can go to the next slide, please. So we are a rural municipality. So you can see we're basically at the very bottom, the sunny south. It's nice, 11 degrees out right now, just so everybody knows, and nice and sunny. So it's a perfect day. Um, we our community where we have a lot of different facilities and we play a critical role during emergencies. So we have 4 different communities, and all of these communities have different needs and different residents that are within. So we're looking for different projects to accommodate them as part of this project. And we have a population of about 21,000 people, and we are growing as part of development. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've really noticed over the past few years with some climate change is the risks that we're encountering. So over the past 3 or 4 years, we've experienced a number of issues directly related to climate risks in our municipality. So in Harrow, Colchester, like I mentioned, we have 4 communities. 2 of them are Harrow and Colchester, which are the most southern end, right along Lake Erie. So some of the things that we've encountered was in 2022, we had a winter ice storm. So we had significant power outages and tree damage. So the power outages, some residents were out for 3 or 4 days. In 2022 as well, we had 100 millimeters of flooding in a single day. The rainfall, 100 millimeters in one single day. So there was a lot of flooding throughout the municipality. 2023, we had a microburst windstorm, a very aggressive storm. So that led to several days of power outages and tree damage. Again, 2023, we had flooding where we had 214 millimeters of rain in 2 days. So our systems just couldn't keep up. And then in 2025, we experienced 60 millimeters of rain in just a few hours. So we're experiencing a lot of these climate issues, these aggressive storms that our infrastructure just can't handle. So we're looking for the regular increase in annual heat warnings as well. So we know that these things are going to keep happening as time goes on. So it wasn't a matter of sitting still and not planning for these things. We're looking for things that we can do. So again, our community facilities, they're very important to the community, just like anybody. So we have to make sure that we're remaining operational. When those shut down, it's really difficult on our residents if there is a need, especially in emergency situations. So we know that when power outages were happening for several days on end, we're experiencing issues with residents where they don't even have medical equipment or they need just to be able to charge their phone or warm up or cool down during those days. So having those facilities shut down was really detrimental to our community. Next slide. So the project that we had focused on 2 key areas of upgrades. The first one was the installation of a backup generator on our arena and community room. And then we also have part of the one community room we have didn't have air conditioning. It was on the second level. So we wanted to make sure that we can accommodate people during these extreme heat events or during emergencies where the power may be out and they need to cool down on these hot days. So the upgrades for us were enhancing the response capacity for emergencies, climate resilience, and community safety and comfort. So like I said, having these facilities that can still remain operational during these emergencies help our residents out. So we use this information to build the business case for council for the need, and we took it to council as part of budget to say these are some of the things that we're looking at doing, and we had a full game plan. And this was really the one area where it was the best bang for our buck. We could have looked at some significant infrastructure upgrades for flooding, but we're talking multi-million dollars for pumping stations and stormwater management plans, which obviously those things are important, but it's just not in the budgets for us to do. So what could we do within the budget allocations that we had or could work with to be able to accomplish our goals? Next slide, please. So for our project, like I mentioned, we had council approval for the project, and then once it was approved in theory for them, we applied to the FCM program to look for grant funding. And the project was contingent on receiving grant funding. So if we didn't receive the grant funding, we wouldn't have been able to proceed with this project. So from there, we received confirmation of the FCM funding, and then we went through the procurement process and the installation of the equipment. Next slide. So like I said before, our grant was contingent on FCM or some sort of grant funding, and we did receive that grant funding through FCM as part of the climate adaptation program. So without them, we wouldn't have been able to have this, and so our community is extremely thankful for what the FCM was able to give us. And as part of that, we'd just like to acknowledge the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Town of Essex Council, and staff for all the work that went into this project, and the project partners and contractors that we worked with outside of just those two above. And I think that's it on my end.
Thanks so much, Jake. And I'd like to add as a step further, then you took that experience and used that to inform the toolkits that we're here today. So that's really exciting to see how you've given back following your project to help other municipalities access and get these projects off the ground. And I'm really looking forward to chatting a bit more about that in the Q&A. But before that, I want to pass it over to Robin on the West Coast to talk a bit about their project. Great. Robin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and present at today's webinar. As mentioned, my name is Robin Holm, and I'm the Manager of Long Range Planning and Sustainability with the Comox Valley Regional District here on Vancouver Island in BC. So today I will be speaking about the Dyke Road Coastal Resiliency Project. This is a project that involved extensive coastal restoration using nature-based solutions with the goal of improving our long-term coastal and climate resiliency. This project is not only recognized for its technical approach, but also its high level of collaboration that was involved in bringing it forward. Today, I'm just going to touch briefly on a bit of the project itself, what we did and why, and then spend some time just going over the key lessons, particularly around the partnerships process and implementation. Next slide, please. Just to provide a little bit of context where we are, Dyke Road Park is located within the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. It's close to Comox IR1 and the Comox Estuary, and this is an area of significant cultural and archaeological value. And because of that context, partnership with the nation was essential from the outset. And this wasn't simply a referral in our project, it influenced the design and the engagement process. Next slide. Again, just showing, that's okay. Just showing you where we are on the island. We're like equidistant from Victoria and the north tip of the island. And just some context for the Comox Valley includes 3 municipalities and surrounding rural areas. Approximately 72,000 people live here. And because of this unique governance structure, we routinely need to collaborate across these boundaries in order to deliver our services, but also in terms of resiliency. That structure really matters because of flooding, sediment movement, habitat systems. They don't align with municipal borders. Next slide, please. Zooming in here, you can see Dyke Road Park is just a very small half-hectare shoreline park in our electoral area B. This is located right adjacent to multiple jurisdictional boundaries along this estuary. And this unique location makes this park, all the jurisdictional boundaries necessitated collaboration and coordination amongst multiple levels of government and partners. Next slide, please. This project did not start as a big resilience initiative. It started as a routine asset management in parks. There was an aging concrete platform that had been flagged for replacement through the park's work plan. Rather than replacing it for a like for like, we used this renewal window to explore a nature-based approach through the Green Shores program with seed funding from the Stewardship Center for BC. As Comox First Nation and environmental partners became involved and engaged in the project, the scope expanded and evolved from a park upgrade into a broader coastal resiliency initiative. Next slide. Before construction, you can see that the site was largely paved, dominated by this large oversized parking area. Invasive species were throughout the entire vegetated space, and it was built at sea level on construction fill. And the site currently experiences regular flooding throughout the winter months from king tides and storm surge. And so this context really helped shape the design objectives and project goals. Next slide. The design introduced a tidal channel to support an enhanced salmon habitat, replaced invasive vegetation with native species, reduced the parking area, and incorporated beach nourishment to raise the site to 2100 flood construction levels. The shoreline was rebuilt to absorb and spread the wave energy rather than deflect it. And different elevations of sediment were introduced to discourage specific invasive species from becoming reestablished. All works were carefully designed to minimize ground disturbance due to archaeological sensitivity. And this really shifted the site from resisting natural processes to working with them. Next slide, please. This image here shows the site at low tide, and this exposes the restored shoreline and the tidal features. You can also see the different levels of topography and how that has helped dissipate the wave energy. Next slide, please. Here you can see the site at high tide, and the water reaches further inland, but the sloped vegetated edges, they help to absorb and soften the energy. You can really see how close the water is to the road. This ability to function through a range of conditions is really what gives this nature-based design resiliency. Next slide. So this project was really strengthened from its collaboration across the internal departments at the CVRD and with Comox First Nation and the number of environmental partners that were involved in this project and our technical professionals that formed a part of the team. That collaboration expanded the objectives and amplified the community benefits. We were able to deliver a stronger climate and ecological outcomes rather than a simple replacement would have achieved. It also shifted from how we think about these small capital projects at our regional district. Adaptation doesn't always have to require a standalone budget. It can be embedded into regular planned renewals. Next slide. And I'll close with these four key lessons. First and foremost, this project created a roadmap for future work through the design process, partnerships, documentation, and the regulatory navigation that was required. We now have a framework that we can apply to future resiliency projects and projects of that require high collaboration. That institutional learning may ultimately be more valuable than the actual physical project itself. Second, capital renewal projects are powerful entry points to adaptation. As mentioned earlier, this project began as a routine asset replacement, and we were able to embed adaptation into this project that was already planned for upgrades. Third, collaboration increases ambition. Expanding the partnership expanded the objectives and strengthened the outcome, although I do want to note that that did require more coordination and time and resources in order to complete the project. And finally, visibility matters. Recognition, documentation, and storytelling have helped to build the internal confidence and external credibility, which has helped advance future resiliency projects. Next slide. The project received a 2024 FCM Sustainable Communities Award, and it has also been featured in Landscape Architecture magazine. This recognition has helped demonstrate that small local government projects can show leadership in climate adaptation. And next slide, please. And in closing, this project shows that resilience can be built incrementally through thoughtful renewal, strong partnerships, and a willingness to rethink the default approach. That's it for the presentation.
Thanks so much, Robin. It's such a beautiful project. I think you have the advantage of some mountains as your backdrop. I thank you both. All three of you, thank you so much for your presentations. I'd like to turn into a live Q&A. So first of all, I'd like to start off by encouraging folks to add questions to the Q&A box. It helps us sort through the questions. But before we dive into audience questions, I'd like to start it off with a couple questions that I have for the panelists. So first off, Jake, I know that you participated in the process to help develop these fact sheets that we're talking about today. And Robin, you've developed some materials as you referenced in your presentation as you went along. So I'd like to pass it along to all of our panelists today, but to ask you to talk a little bit about the value of templates and project records in helping you get projects off the paper. So maybe, Jake, if I could start with you, and then Robin and Jim, invite you to contribute afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, from my end, being in a small municipality of 21,000, we don't have infinite amount of staff, and I think a lot of people can understand that municipalities always seem to have a shortage of staff. But with that, we don't have a specific person that writes grants on our behalf. So it basically becomes either the department manager or the department director that has to write the grants. So not being specialists in grant writing, it's really important to have kind of that step-by-step guideline of what we can do and what the FCM in this case is looking for. So the templates are exactly that, a step-by-step guide to take the guesswork away from what's being asked, and everything is laid out there for you. At the end of the day, FCM wants you to be successful and they want to give you the money for good projects. So they're giving you exactly what they want and exactly what's needed. So if you follow the templates, they're going to guide you in the right direction. And then FCM has been more than accommodating in any respect that I've had to reach out to them if there were questions. So if you don't understand a part of the template, or if there's a question that you might want, just reach out to them directly, and they're extremely helpful in any situation.
I'm so glad to hear that, Robin.
Yeah, maybe I'll just chime in that we didn't have the benefit of using any sort of templates from FCM, and this was a project that's been in the works for a few years at this point. So maybe it was already helpful that we have done a number of projects like grant applications. We've done RFPs, procurement. We have experience. Our department has experience in that. But I would say where this was a bit more out of our realm was that it was highly complex. So many different partners outside of the organization, an incredibly large budget, and just so like a layered funding strategy for this project. And just like working so closely with another department, although that seems kind of intuitive, it's highly unusual with us. And so like that was a completely new approach, was planning, leading the project up until it came time for implementation. It was then handed over to the Parks Department because they're more experienced in the delivery of capital projects. But through that, I would say there's been a lot of internal capacity built. So I would say that we developed our own templates in a way, like we had to really utilize a project charter. Again, like we applied for 1.2 million to UBCM was our funder, and that's the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. And so it's a huge budget for us to manage, and also a very, very complicated procurement process, as well as a really complicated permitting regulatory landscape for us to navigate. There's about 2 weeks in the year that you can do any sort of construction in an estuary in BC. So you can imagine how complicated that makes a procurement process when you're looking for a contractor that can take that on and that has experience working with archaeology. And it's highly complex. So I would say that we developed a lot of experience through this project that we will then be able to transfer that knowledge to another project. But I would say if somebody was offering me a kit of all of those things, that would have been really, really helpful. And again, the scalability. And I think that that is the value, is being able to scale up or scale down and realize that you develop confidence. When you've been able to do it once, you're able to do it again, and just make it fit whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I think it's going to be really helpful to these smaller communities to be able to have these like off the shelf templates ready to go.
Yeah, I think the two communities have spoken well in terms of their experience, and I hope that we've been able to build on some of those experiences as well as from other communities, so that people have spent a lot of time trying to do things from the ground up, and hopefully the next cohort of folks who are trying to do projects will be able to benefit from that. Of course, everyone is going to have their own experience. I'm not going to say a template is going to, gonna gonna make it completely simple, but hopefully we've done what we can to help folks along so that you can learn from your peers on their experience rather than having to reinvent the wheel.
And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to GMF's outreach team, who does a really good job of relaying the challenges that they hear from municipalities back to us. So as we were scoping out the breadth of this toolkit with Fraser Basin Council, we really kept in mind some of those challenges that we frequently hear about, and kept that as a mission of trying to reduce barriers to entry to be able to scale up the solutions that you can see in this and make it largely applicable, or something in there for just about every community.
Thanks, Dustin. That's a really important piece. The kind of speaking a bit about the scalability and kind of the broad impacts, I'm hoping to ask you both, Jake and Robin, about some of the broader impacts that these projects have for your communities beyond kind of the more direct impacts that we're talking about with these projects, but how it delivers kind of these co-benefits for your communities. Maybe Jake, if I can start with you again and go for Robin.
Sure. So there's a number of benefits. Obviously, a generator and air conditioning in a facility just helps that the facility can maintain continuity. It can keep going when we need to. On any given day, whether it's an hour power outage or several days, we have the ability to keep running. So that's the primary direct benefits. But in terms of secondary things, obviously the safety of our residents, we heard from the residents loud and clear that they need a solution to be able to live and be safe during times of emergencies. So that was the number one. Increased use of facility space. Power outages can cause medical device issues. So we did hear from some of the residents during public feedback that some of the medical devices that they have to charge up and they require power. So if they don't have power for long periods of time, the batteries can die and they have to have a recharge in place. So that was something that myself not having medical issues, I wouldn't have thought about that without hearing from public feedback. So that's why I would really encourage the public feedback as part of your process, if you can, to try and get some of those different ideas. In terms of other benefits, there's no heat or cooling in the shelter without this project. Flooding in the areas I talked about earlier, we had a lot of flooding, so that can lead to homelessness because their whole basements can be flooded. They might be pushed out of their homes, seeking short-term emergency shelters where we can accommodate that now if we had to open up these emergency shelters. And it also assists local agencies. So Red Cross is a partner with us, and they now have the ability to use this as one of their emergency shelter locations if it's not necessarily something that was municipally run. They can use our facilities as well, and we have other partners such as the policing agencies. So sometimes during large scale situations, we've had SWAT teams and search and rescue teams utilizing our facilities, and they don't want to set up a full facility if it's not going to be able to run in an emergency situation. So for our example, a power outage, if they know that facility might shut down soon because of a power outage, there's no point in them setting up. So it gives them another option as part of the community to be able to run their operations.
For sure. Robin?
Yeah, I'm hoping you can repeat the question. I just want to make sure that I
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's going to be very different case to Jake, but talking about a bit more about the co-benefits that this project and the kind of the broader impacts that it has for your community beyond um, maybe direct use of the site.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in the presentation, this was a highly collaborative project, and I think it really the first of its kind. So we were so involved with the partners. So this would have been environmental nonprofits, the First Nation. We worked really closely with the Comox First Station, the Guardian Watchmen. So their primary mandate is environmental stewardship and habitat restoration. So I would say that this project really like established a lot of trust and built meaningful relationships. And so when you think about working on future initiatives, I feel like we have laid the groundwork for those relationships. We've been able to expand the expertise that was coming to the table. As I mentioned, we're parks and parks planners and land use planners. And so we were able to expand our expertise, expand that scope, and be able to deliver on a project that would go much more beyond what we would traditionally have delivered on. And I think that's something that's unique about this park, and probably mentioned as well. It's like just given its location, it's highly visible. And so with that, you've had so many, people in the community talking about it and trying to understand what is the CVRD doing there. And I think that it's been such a great conversation starter, and a teaching moment or educational opportunity to talk about what resilience can look like. And then we've also been able to talk about what we've been doing in terms of like working with the First Nation and trying to ensure that that archaeology and that cultural history is protected. And I think that for those opportunities, the fact that we were able to leverage funding by working with those partners, I think it really shows you how those benefits can be amplified when you come at it with very much like an open mind, and just highly collaborative. So yeah, I think that that probably touches on the benefits and of this project and just like what we were able to accomplish.
For sure. It's so great to hear about how it's expanded your ability to work with partners. We hear often that it can be really difficult for municipalities to build those relationships and build really meaningful partnerships. So it's great to hear that your project has allowed you to do that. I'm wondering, both of you come from pretty small municipalities in the scale of Canadian municipalities, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how do you choose to prioritize what adaptations projects to move forward with, especially as small communities with limited capacity. Maybe Robin, if you'd like to answer this one first.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that this had failing infrastructure really presented a bit of an opportunity. We'd already been working really closely with the Stewardship Center BC as a member of a local government working group. And so we already had enabling policy in our official community plan. We were already supporting nature-based solutions. And so I think it really presented an opportunity where we could actually demonstrate what we are trying to encourage, like on a property level. And I think that what we recognize in our other work, and especially when it comes to climate change or building resiliency, it can be very overwhelming, or people don't understand what it is that they can do themselves, and especially at a property level. And so through this project, we were able to show property owners what being like a steward of the environment can actually look like. If you were to take a nature-based approach to your shoreline rather than building a concrete seawall, you can see how much more resilient that site can be. And I think that that this was really just like using an opportunity where we were already going to have to do something, and then we were able to leverage the resources that could be tapped into, and then you then tap into all of the funding that can be available. And so I think it's just being able to build on that expertise, the capacity in house, and then you go out to your network or your partners when you have kind of reached what you can achieve on your own. So, yeah.
Sure. Jake?
Yeah, for the town of Essex, it was easy in terms of prioritization for this one because of the number of experiences we had over the past 3 or 4 years. And it was very clear that we had to do something to increase our public safety and our operational capacity. So It was really just like any other small municipality. It was really a funding issue that we were having. So it was something that we had tabled and we had planned and we wanted to work on, but we really had to find how we could prioritize it in terms of a funding model. So having the grant streams opened up for that funding model really helped us with prioritization. It was really working in a political landscape. It was really a political win for our council as well as a community safety win. It was mutually beneficial for everybody to have this project done. So this one wasn't necessarily that difficult to prioritize, but just in terms of general prioritization, it's looking at sometimes those quick wins that can really help the community. So anytime we can have those as part of our prioritization model, where we don't have to spend multi-million dollars for a capital infrastructure project, it's a win for us.
Sure. Kind of speaking a bit about getting these projects off the ground, often you need multiple departments to come together on these projects. And I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about how you get all the departments kind of rowing the same way, um, in the same direction. Um, maybe Jake, if I could come back to you, and then Robin.
Sure. So as a municipality, I think everybody can understand that there tends to be silos within. So you tend to operate with your department in mind. But what we really try to do is going into budgets, we try and have a senior management level discussion so that everybody's aware of what the other projects are that people are looking to do as part of their department models. So trying to increase that communication between departments, I think, is extremely important because some of the projects that we've had discussions on we find out that we're doing very similar things. It's like, okay, how can we just work together on something like this? So a great example is with the generator model that we just had. We found out that the public works yard during these times of power outages, they're working in the middle of the night and they have no power in their building. And it's like, okay, well, you guys are experiencing similar things at your level. So just identifying what those issues are is extremely helpful. We also we do an annual exercise for emergency management as part of our municipal mandates. So we tend to have real world, well, I say fake, but we try and make it realistic for what we would experience in the real world. And some of these situations have come up in the real world as well as during our annual exercises. So we can look at those priorities and see again what type of things would we require for emergency management and what are we going to do about those to make sure that we can have that continuity of business. Um, Looking at what the biggest impacts are for the community, getting council authorization for applying for grants because we are the administration, so we recommend to council what we should be doing, but they ultimately make the decision. So having that business case to present to council and show the justification, the need for it, although in many situations this one included when there's such public feedback. It's pretty obvious to them what the needs are of the community, but where does it lie in the financial models is what we have to recommend to them. So it's really everybody in the municipality. It starts from the administrative and management level and bringing it up to council to make sure everybody's on the same page and understands. And we also hold budget open houses, so we can also get community feedback when we do have plans for budgets, and we can see where people think that the resources are needed. So whether it's roads tends to be one of the popular ones, but with the situations we've had lately, emergency management was one of the top things that the community was looking for. So it was easy to justify going to council with this and the data supporting that the community was looking for something like this.
Absolutely. Robin.
I think Jake's covered it really well. And so maybe just from our perspective, I'll just offer that I feel like if there's an opportunity to align work plans, looking at when departments have the ability to free up some capacity, I think at least in our case, we've been working on a multi-year project that started back 2018 where we have been working on essentially a coastal flood strategy. And so essentially it was just continually building off of that one project, and it was trying to have a better understanding of our coastal flood risk. And so much of that work just supported future stages. And so by having that ability to just keep building off, we'd already kind of brought along our elected officials, we'd already brought along internal departments. So there seemed to be some alignment in terms of prioritization. And I would also just say that when you are able to do one project really well, there seems to be trust established, whether that's through your elected officials, through your senior management. And so for this project, we have already leveraged the success of this project into already 2 other projects that are at varying stages. And so I think that you were starting to build a bit of a culture of more coordination and collaboration internally. And so with that, I think it's easier to kind of be on the same page when looking at your like just determining your work plan as well as going into strategic planning with your elected officials.
For sure. It's really exciting to hear about the momentum that this project has built in Comox, and I'm really excited to hear like updates as like the projects continue to come. There's a very specific question for you, Robin, in the Q&A. For the Dyke Road Park project, was there a special plant planted to be more resilient along the shore? I'm not sure if you know those details, but I'm curious.
Okay, I'll try my very best. So my understanding from the biologists that have been involved in this project is that carex is the native species that we were wanting to encourage to be established. And as I explained earlier, those kind of the exclosures that you saw, the fencing, we were trying to keep the Canadian geese out because they love carex, and they start eating any of that carex whenever it gets started. So there was I can't remember which, it was an invasive grass that was being established, and it was because the shoreline was being eroded. And so if they were able to establish that shoreline at a slightly higher elevation, the carex could be established and the other invasive grass species would not establish. And it was really just centimeters in difference. And so this was the value in having those environmental nonprofits involved in this project. So we were able to have all of that expertise at the table and establish a planting plan that would ensure that our native species have the best chance at being established. And maybe something else I'll just mention too is that this project, the actual construction of it was done in phases. And so we did the shoreline works in this past, in 2025, and that was to allow those species from being to allow them to be established before the park opens to the public, and that it will not open until this summer. And so it allowed an entire year of those species to be able to be established. So there was a lot of strategy that was really put into the actual implementation of this project.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to see when it's opened.
June of this year. So,
awesome. Yeah. For Jake, I have a question in the chat that I think would be great for you to answer. A population for 21,000 is a bit large for municipality in Atlantic Canada. I'm sure that they have a pretty small municipality. What advice do you have for communities that only have a CAO on staff in terms of acting on climate adaptation and climate resilience? I know you're not quite only a chief okay, CAO, but do you have anything you could share?
Yeah, I think just sitting in a role where I wear quite a few hats. My department structure is the deputy CAO, and then I oversee. I'm the director of parks, recreation, culture, um, facilities, and our fire department. So I know that especially in small municipalities, we can wear many hats. It can be difficult. I think in this circumstance, I think the templates, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think the templates are going to help guide you and alleviate a lot of that work and the guessing and time that you might have to put into an application where you may not have that step-by-step guide. So it's really, I think it would be a matter of finding out through your strategic planning what the priorities are and how they can relate to climate adaptation. So I'm not sure. Our municipality also has a climate adaptation plan, which we did a few years ago. And we're actually redoing it this upcoming year. It's as part of a 5-year cycle. So we did have a really firm guideline on what type of stuff we were looking for. So once we had these emergency management situations come up, we were able to tie everything to the climate adaptation plan and kind of work on it from there. So I think it's being a small municipality, really understanding what your community needs are and what the goals of council are. And then if it fits within the framework of what you're looking to do as part of this grant, then using that step-by-step guide will really help you along the way and alleviate a lot of the pressure and workload. Still, obviously, there is work that has to be done as part of it because you have to have all the data and the information to be able to put into the grant application. But that, like I said, that step-by-step guide will help you along the way.
For
If
sure,
I could
Jim.
just
Yeah,
add
please.
something, I think the other thing for smaller communities to consider where it makes sense is, are there ways to work together with others in your region? That's what we've done in Northeast BC with a number of small communities. Some are very small, not all of them. Some of them do have staff, some of them have very little staff capacity, and so that's another opportunity, I guess, especially on climate adaptation, where you might be facing similar issues or have similar um, things that you're trying to work on together.
Yeah, if I can add just one more thing, I did see in the chat from Dustin. I think that's a great point that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for everything. There's other municipalities that have done similar things. So look for that. Also, one thing as technology is changing, ChatGPT is a huge time saver for things. You just have to verify that the information that you're receiving is accurate. So make sure you're asking for resources and web links on what it's telling you to verify that it's accurate, but you can get a lot of good information for, I mean, daily work, grants, anything research related by using AI features. But like I said, just make sure you're validating what the information is that you're receiving.
For sure. There's a lot of really great resources out there, but it's key to make sure they're correct. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna quickly wrap us up, but a big thank you to all of you for all you've shared today. It's really exciting to see the momentum of these projects and knowing that there's just going to be more in the future that we can build off of. And on that note, I'm just going to ask that share again. I know Dustin shared it earlier, but if you want to connect with us, if you want to hear about future funding for future funding offers that FCM is offering, please sign up to the Connect. You can also look on our website for a bit more information. I'm going to move us along quickly. My colleague's going to quickly launch a poll. We ask you to please fill it out. It gives us an idea of what folks are looking for at these kind of events. And while you are filling that out, I'd like to plug our next webinar. We have an upcoming webinar on a new flood risk tool to help you assess flood risks and help you take the next step. We also have a regular community of practice that meets, which can be a really good source of resources, of support. Often we'll have guest speakers from different communities across the country that are doing this work on the ground. If that is something that is of interest to you, we are accepting new folks on a rolling basis. So we really encourage you to reach out and consider that as a way to access support in moving forward in your adaptation work. But other than that, please fill out the survey, and that's it for us today. Thank you so much for spending your Friday with us, at least an hour of it. Yeah, we'll end the webinar.